This video is brought to you by PrizePicks. Hey, what's up, and welcome to QnA, the show where I take your questions and answer them here in video format. A ton of questions to get into, so let's just get started. First question comes from Dr. Napalm, who says this: if Makai Lemon is still available at 24 and Tate and Tyson are already gone, do we take him? My only concern is that both Lemon and Judy are at their best in the slot. What do you think? So here's the thing about wide receiver. There are three different main positions within the position group itself, right? There is the X receiver, the slot receiver, as you mentioned, and then the Z, right? So there's your X, your opposite, and then your slot. The thing about those positions is that they aren't a binary spot, which means nobody, even if they're described as a slot receiver, is taking 100% of their snaps in the slot. It's usually a split, a percentage split. So Jerry Jeudy is better in the slot. But when people say he's better in the slot, what they're saying is Jerry Jeudy is better when he's taking about 40% of his snaps from the slot. So because that's how the wide receiver position works, you're always going to be moving Jerry Jeudy. He's not going to play just at the slot all game. Even at his highest slot percentage, I believe it's 40%. Let me double check that. Yeah, like what, in 2024, 2024, when he was the most productive in his career with the Cleveland Browns, he took about 1,062 snaps total, but only 369 of those snaps were from the slot. So quick, napkin math, that's under 40% for Jerry Jeudy at a maximum. So just because Jerry does need to play in the slot does not mean that you can't draft Makai and put him in the slot too, because Jerry's only taking up 37% of those slot reps, right? You're going to have another 40% available for Makai Lemon and then 20% available for other people, right? Also, Makai Lemon can play on the outside. You know what I mean? Like, I think Makai can play on the outside. Jerry Jeudy can play on the outside. Again, he had 1,200 yards with most of his snaps being at wide. So don't think of somebody being a slot receiver and thinking that's 100% of what they're going to do. Even when somebody says that that person is a slot receiver, maybe it's 60% of what they do. But when we're talking about Jerry Jeudy and Makai Lemon, both these guys are going to take the majority of their snaps at wide. We're just saying, hey, if you move them into the slot about 30-40% of the time, they could be even more productive, because you do want to move these guys around and play different matchups, and having two guys you can move around gives you more options, not less. So that wouldn't prohibit the Browns from taking Makai Lemon. That would actually, I think, make it more intriguing. Also, Makai Lemon's a completely different player than Jerry Jeudy. What Jerry Jeudy's really good at is getting separation, and then when he has that separation, catching on the run and kind of making yak plays out of that. What he's bad at is catching through contact. What Makai Lemon is elite at is catching through contact. I think pound for pound, Makai Lemon is the best contested catch wide receiver in this draft class. If we're just talking about how big he is or how small he is for how many contested catches that he wins, nobody has that kind of a ratio like Makai Lemon does. So I think that Makai and Jerry Jeudy are probably the most compatible pair here. Yeah, Carnell Tate, who plays. So Carnell Tate is primarily a boundary guy. Like, he's going to be on the wide. So he only took 30 snaps in 2025 at this slot. Now, that could change in the pros because of what he was asked to do, but that's kind of like there for him, right? Makai Lemon took the bulk of his snaps at the slot. Again, maybe he's like a 50 split. You could give Jerry Jeudy about 37%. There's still a ton of slot reps to go around there with Mekhi Lemon. I think that fits pretty easily. And then you have somebody like Jordan Tyson, who again played wide a lot, little bit more slot history than a Mekhi Lemon, right? In 2024, he took 161 snaps in the slot, but last year at ASU, he took about 81. So a little bit more of a balance there. I think that's not really something that's going to stop the Browns from drafting one of those two. I think it actually encourages them because that flexibility is useful for the Browns. And you look at Mekhi Lemon, what he does well. The Browns don't have a receiver they could get the ball to, and they can be a playmaker, right? Like just make something happen. Mekhi Lemon and Jordan Tyson are of that variety of wide receiver. And when you're trying to trot out quarterbacks that you're not sure about, quarterbacks that you want to give a floor to, those are the kind of wide receivers that can provide a nice floor for a quarterback. Because if you're Shador and you know that, hey, he's going to win man on man early on, and we can get an easy 6 or 7 yards here just by throwing it to Mekhi Lemon, that's going to put you in easier situations to succeed than if you have somebody like Carnell Tate, who's at his best when you allow him to win downfield, which is much more difficult to make happen, especially in the NFL level, especially with the new offensive line, especially with the new offense. So I think those two options actually make a lot more sense than Tate, the more I think about it. Pangas says this: do you think the Browns would find a trade partner to move down from 6? What's your gut feeling? I think they will find a trade partner. Will they find one in their sweet spot? I don't think so, right? I am concerned about that. I don't know if they're going to be able to move from 6 to 11 like they want to, right? I think it's going to be a decision of, hey, do the Browns want to stay at 6 or do the Browns want to go all the way back to like 20? You know, because if the Browns move, there's a certain level of return they would like, and I don't know if they're going to get that from moving 5 or 6 spots back. Now, this is where I'll give Andrew Berry the benefit of the doubt, because he has proven me wrong here before, right? And if you prove me wrong, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt going forward. And that goes with anybody, right? You know, if a quarterback proves me wrong, if Deshaun or Shador proves me wrong, okay, you know, I give you the benefit of the doubt. Andrew has proven me wrong before when it comes to his ability to get trade compensation. And, you know, I didn't think he was going to be able to get an extra first last year for that second overall pick. I thought that was kind of ridiculous. He was able to maneuver that. So I'm not going to count him out, but I would say if I'm just looking at the base logic for all of these teams in the top 15, it doesn't really make the most sense this year to give up a ton to move up a few spots. Only in a couple of select cases can I even see the justification for it. But it might make sense for somebody sitting at 20 to move up and be able to give up a lot. But yeah, I think that's going to be the dilemma that they're going to be in, is that the trade backs are going to be a little bit further down the draft than maybe they would like. And they have to make the decision on whether that's worth it or not. The next question comes from Minch, who says this: hey, Q, what do you look for when analyzing tackle play? What makes Noah a guard, and what makes Caleb Lomu a second-tier tackle? My dream draft would be Noah at 6 and Lomu at 24. I'm curious to know what traits you value over others. So before I even answer this question, I actually did a video where I was talking to JP Acosta about this, and JP, he's a talent evaluator. He's somebody who has been doing draft work in the NFL draft community for a very long time, very well respected. And you know, me and him had a full-on conversation about this. I think it is the video about why Monroe Freeling is tackle number 1, where we went over these things about why is it that Monroe gets a jump over these guys for physical traits and all of these things. When it comes to tackle play, one, this is the most unforgiving position in all of football when it comes to physical traits, right? No position is more hostile to physical outliers than tackle. What I mean by this is simple. When you look at like wide receivers, you will find outliers at wide receiver, right? Like the typical, prototypical size for wide receiver, about 6'2", 210, right? But you'll see wide receivers all the time that are productive, that are 5'11", that are 6 foot, or maybe they're 6 foot, but only 183 pounds, right? You'll see this with running backs, where like the prototypical size for a running back is probably about like 5'11", 225 pounds. But there are a lot of guys who have productive careers that don't really fit that mold. Maybe they're smaller, maybe they're lighter, but they don't necessarily fit that physical mold, the template for what a running back looks like. And you can go on edge, right? There's James Harrison's who are 5'10", able to play edge, physical outliers at defensive tackle, guys who aren't the biggest but able to make it work, physical outliers at guard, at center, physical outliers at safety, at corner, sometimes at linebacker. But you don't really see a lot of physical outliers at tackle. Like, when's the last time you've seen a tackle under 295 pounds? When is the last time you've seen a tackle who's shorter than 6'2", right? Like, you don't see those kind of things. And that's because the tackle position, when it comes to the physical requirements to play it, it's just the most unforgiving position. I went through, since 2020, looked at all the all-pro tackles. None of those tackles had arms shorter than 33 inches. Think about that. Like, 5 years of all-pro teams? It's like 10 tackles. Well, not even 10. It's like, 6 tackles per team. It's a lot of tackles that have made all-pro since 2020. None of those guys under 33-inch arms. That's how unforgiving the position is when it comes to the physical requirements. You can name me undersized wide receivers that were elite. You can name me undersized running backs, undersized quarterbacks, Russell Wilson, right? That were elite. But you can't name me a tackle with 32-inch arms who's under 6'2", who's not the biggest, who was able to make it work. Because there's just no forgiveness for size at the tackle position. So to go back to your question, what makes Mawanoa more of a guard to some people than a tackle? It's his athletic traits, right? And that combined with his length. Like, people don't feel like he has the athletic ability to be comfortable or as comfortable as he would be at guard on an island. I think Mawanoa would be fine at tackle, but he certainly only played right tackle, so there's concern about flipping him from right to left. I think you can do it, especially in this day and age where right and left tackle are more, how do I put this? There's not much of a difference between right and left tackle anymore, so I think you can flip him. I'm in the outlier opinion. I know people are going to go, well, Jet Wills got flipped, but Jet Wills wasn't as because he got flipped from right to left tackle. Jet Wills was terrible because Jet Wills had other issues going on than him playing on the right side or the left side. Like, that's not the magic fix for Jet Wills. But that's why some people think Mawanoa is a guard. His skill set translates better to guard than it does to tackle. And tackle is a very unforgiving position when it comes to what your physical skill set plays towards, right? Like, Will Campbell was an amazing guard prospect, but they put him out at tackle and he looked like butt cheeks when he was out there with the Patriots. It's not because he's a bad player. It's just the tackle position is unforgiving. It's just the most unforgiving position in football. What makes Caleb Lomu a second-tier tackle? Play strength. That's really it. Play strength. He does not play as strong as other players at the tackle position do. He doesn't have great play strength. And, at the NFL level, where guys are remarkably stronger than they are in college, that's usually indicative of a guy who's going to take a couple of years to figure it out and get the strength needed, if he can get that strength needed. So play strength is the big issue there with Caleb Lomu. So I hope that answers your questions. If you have more questions about that, make sure you check out that video I did with JP where I think spent like a good 30 minutes talking about it. It was a great conversation. Hey, let me talk to you about my sponsor for this year, PrizePicks. It's a fun way to win cash while you're watching your favorite teams. Forget complex betting rules. Their app is designed to be incredibly easy to use. Just pick more or less on a few player stats and lock in your lineup. Speaking of, here are my picks for this upcoming NFL season. They have Myles Garrett at 14 sacks here. I think he will get more than 14 sacks. Joe Burrow at 3,875 passing yards. I think he'll be a 4,000-yard passer. I'm going to go with more. They have Derrick Henry at 1,224 yards. I'm going to go less than that. Check to see if PrizePicks is available in your state. You can follow me on the app at KWEN_C to see all of my lineups. Download the PrizePicks app today. Play $5 and get $50 in lineups when you download the app using the link in the description. BG says, yo, hope all is good with you. Hope, how would you feel about Kenyon Sadiq if you can't get Tate or Lemon or Tyson at 24? One, we're not going to get Tate, Lemon, or Tyson at 24. Like, that's crazy. I don't think that's happening. I think we're setting ourselves up to be disappointed. Two, we're not getting Kenyon Sadiq at 24. Three, the Browns already have a tight end that they feel good about highlighting. I don't know how you would manage bringing in Kenyon Sadiq like without taking away focus from Harold Fannin. And if you're doing stuff in the draft to take away focus from Harold Fannin, does it really make you better overall? Like, I get it, you can use them both at the same time, but not really, right? Like, 2 tight end packages, we've seen the limitations of that, right? 12 personnel over the last few years. And we also understand that, like, 12 personnel, having 2 tight ends on the field at the same time is not like having 2 wide receivers on the field where you can have 2 1,000-yard wide receivers. It's usually a situation where one of those tight ends is going to have to greatly sacrifice in their production. I mean, look what happened to David Njoku in the Browns offense last year. And I know it was Kevin Stefanski, but it's still football. This still happens regardless of Kevin's offense or not. Like, think about how little David was used after Harold was given the green light. Like, it's not an equal proposition. You're not going to have 2 1,000-yard tight ends. So I think that would be counterproductive. I don't think you make your team better because best case scenario, Kenyon Sadiq is really good, but you already have Harold Fannin, who you think is really good. And you can only really have one tight end that's like the focus of your receiving production in an NFL offense. So I don't really think that's going to be something that they consider. Q, do you think that Myles restructuring his contract is Andrew Berry trying to sell the market that he could draft the edge this draft and to get trade back to being to scoop a 27 pick back? Let me read that again. What? Do you think that the Myles restructuring his contract is Andrew trying to sell the market that he could draft the edge this draft and get to trade back being... No, I don't think this is some 4D chess move. I think it's just simple contract maintenance with Andrew Berry and Myles. I think he did the contract maintenance. It happened during the period of the year where we're the most bored, and now we're just like making up shit because we're bored, right? Like, there's reason to believe that Myles could get moved sooner than later, but that's not this year, I think. I did a whole video about that, so make sure you check that out. Brandon Goodman says, which players do you think really need to show up this season to secure their future with the Browns? The entire quarterback room. I think that's the only position that's really, at the point where they have to fight for their jobs. I mean, they just replaced the entire offensive line, so they're good there. Quarterback is the one where it's like, hey, we don't know what we're going to do in the future. We know that Deshaun's going to be gone after this season. But if you're Dylan Gabriel and you're Shedeur Sanders, and you want to have a foothold in the quarterback conversation, past this season, you got to perform. So I would say the quarterbacks, especially the rookies drafted last year. Those are the guys who I think need to step up the most. Common Sense says this: Hey Q, when analysts categorize a player as blue chip, are they more concerned with floor or ceiling? Everybody's calling Reese and Downs blue chips. Makes me think of a player like Tyson and Bailey have higher ceilings, in my opinion. So when somebody says that a player is a blue chip, they're not referring to floor or ceiling. They're referring to floor and ceiling. So if you think like Myles Garrett, right? Myles Garrett, blue chip prospect coming out, I think we could all agree. The reason he was a blue chip prospect, really high floor, right? A guy is athletic, is big, is freakish as Myles, only going to be but so bad in the NFL. But then again, a guy is athletic, is freakish as Myles Garrett, could be one of the best edges we've ever seen, right? Like his worst case scenario for Myles Garrett was like Jadeveon Clowney, a Pro Bowl edge. Best case scenario, the greatest guy we've ever seen. He gets 200 career sacks and he goes into the Hall of Fame the day he retires. That's a blue chip prospect, right? Like the high floor, high ceiling combination. I don't really think there are any blue chip prospects in this draft class. Like I like Mendoza a lot. I wouldn't say that Mendoza is a blue chipper by any means. I think Mendoza, pretty high floor, pretty nice ceiling, but I don't think Mendoza is going to be one of the 3 best quarterbacks in the NFL or anything like that. I don't think that's where his ceiling is. Like Joe Burrow, I think is as close to a blue chip where it's like, okay, Joe Burrow, really nice floor for Joe, and then super high ceiling, top 3 quarterback in the NFL. That's what makes somebody a blue chipper. There is some debate about whether positional value factors into this. And I think there is something to be said about this, right? Can you be a blue chip prospect at punter, at long snapper, at kicker? Probably not, right? Because you don't affect the game as much. But then when you get to running back, because of the rarity of that position, or guard, center, because of the the lack of rarity at those positions, is it possible to have a blue chip prospect there? Or, if we go to safety, right? Like there's questions about that. Can somebody be a blue chip prospect there? Don't think there's one in this draft class. Even like Caleb Downs, really high floor, pretty nice ceiling. I think he will be one of the better at best, one of the best safeties in NFL, but I don't think he's going to be like, who would he have to be a blue chip? I don't think he's going to have like Ed Reed high ceiling, right? Or Troy Polamalu high ceiling. I hope I'm wrong on that because I'm rooting for Caleb Downs, but that's not where I see his ceiling getting to. There's not a blue chip prospect in this draft class. Last year you could maybe argue the rarity of a prospect like Travis Hunter could have pushed him into blue chip territory. I think the Jaguars would certainly argue that that's the case there. You can make the argument that maybe Abdul Carter was up there as a blue chipper last year. Like I think somebody like Mason Graham, close to a blue chipper because he was just so good, so young at Michigan. But like, then you have to ask yourself, do you think that his ceiling is like J.J. Watt or Aaron Donald? I don't know if that's where his ceiling is. I think, he has a high chance to hit what a pretty nice, I think he has a high chance to become like a Cam Hayward or something like that. But I don't know if he goes J.J. Watt, one of the best of all time, right? So probably like, I don't know what what would be gold chipper, I guess it would be. But we throw around the term blue chipper a lot to mean prospects that we like, but in reality, a blue chipper is somebody who has an amazing floor, instant starter, instant high-level starter, and then somebody who can get to a level to where we're talking about them as not just one of the best players in the NFL, but one of the best players of their era, right? Like, again, Myles Garrett, blue chip, best player of his era. Joe Burrow, right? One of the best quarterbacks of his era, right? Like that's a blue chip to me. And I think when a lot of analysts use that term, that's what they should be thinking about or what they are thinking about. Jed Henson says this, Q, would you rather trade for Anthony Richardson or Jalen Milroe? It depends on what the price is for Anthony Richardson and what the price is for Jalen Milroe. If you're saying I got to give up a 3rd-round pick for Jalen Milroe, but a 6th-round pick for Anthony Richardson, I'd rather pull the trigger on Anthony Richardson. I think both of these players are kind of an example of an interesting phenomenon that happens when you're like evaluating quarterbacks in a draft class, which is quarterbacks that you don't want to draft, but you might want to be like their 2nd or 3rd team. Jalen Milroe, I remember saying this last year about Jalen Milroe. I really like Jalen Milroe as a prospect. I think he has a lot of potential, but a lot to work on, but I really like his personality, right? I think that he has this kind of mindset, this personality that I can buy into him getting better over time. The issue with that is it could take Jalen Milroe a long time to figure it out, right? And longer than his rookie contract is. And maybe you want to be Jalen Milroe's 2nd team, probably his 3rd team, right? Malik Willis is another, like, you might want to be his 3rd team, right? That's kind of the feeling I get with Anthony Richardson and Jalen Milroe is like, I don't know if I definitely don't want to be their 1st team. I might want to be their 2nd team, but I definitely would be interested in being their 3rd team. So I think I would rather wait until the prices come down for Jalen Milroe. And with Anthony Richardson, if it's anything more than like a 6th-round flyer, I don't think I'm interested. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below about that one. Bo Duke says this. My question is, what traits and abilities that Carson Schwesinger's game that sets him apart from other linebackers around the league? And what do you think identifying these traits in college prospects could give us consistent hits in the draft? Well, I think Carson Schwesinger was a really good prospect. You know what I mean? The reason he was such a good prospect, he had really great eyes at the linebacker position, strong instincts, and just such a smooth athlete. Just watching Carson Schwesinger move, everything looks intentional when Carson Schwesinger does it, even when he's forced into bad feet or something like that, right? Like, he does everything and it feels so intentional and so right. He can mirror the hips of Lamar Jackson because he's such a smooth athlete. And then when you add that on top of his IQ and you add that on top of his eyes, like, remember one of the things I used to talk about with JOK was sometimes JOK's body moved faster than his brain. You could see it early in his career where JOK would just shoot out, boom, like that. But then you would realize, you would see JOK realize, oh shit, I don't know what to do. Like, my body reacted before my mind knew what I was doing. With Carson Schwesinger, what makes him so special, and JOK was a special linebacker, right? But what makes Carson Schwesinger even more special is he seems to have the ability to play as fast as, well, to think as fast as he can play. So he's never out of position. He's never in an awkward spot, and that's what makes him look so smooth. So it's like his brain is just moving at such a fast pace, and then he's able to athletically back that up, and it just creates really, really great linebacker play. Now, is there a trait that you could get from Carson Schwesinger that could help you identify prospects amongst all position groups and everything else? No. You know, evaluating a prospect is a pretty individual player-by-player case. And when it comes to Carson Schwesinger, you got to see why he fits your system and what the vision is for him. The process that brought you to Carson Schwesinger is maybe more of what you should focus on than like what Carson's traits are and if a guy has those traits, right? So if you're Jason Tarver and you're trying to find another linebacker or another good player to add to your linebacker room, you should think, hey, what were the fundamentals of the process that got me to Carson Schwesinger, and replicate that process, not necessarily just look for a clone of Carson Schwesinger's traits. You know, it's more about that than the individual traits. All right, we got a ton of questions this week, man. 20 in a Roberto. says this. Q, you mentioned Shador's leap to get to average quarterback would be bigger than Josh Allen's leap to where he is now. Do you think that, to be fair to Shador, I said the leap for Shador to become Sam Darnold is bigger than Josh Allen's leap to where he is now in terms of EPA and success rate. That's just a fact, right? Completion percentage over expectation as well, right? You could argue with me about it. It's not really something to argue. That would be a fact, right? The jump that Josh Allen made from 2019 to 2020 was a lesser jump when it comes to those three statistics than where it would be for Shador to get to where he was last year to where Sam Darnold was this year. So I want to clarify that's the point I was making. I wasn't comparing him to average quarterback. I was comparing him to a quarterback that won the Super Bowl. Do you think that if Deshaun Watson goes back to top 15 quarterback play, would that leap be better than or bigger than both leaps mentioned? That leap would be the leap for Deshaun Watson to get to Sam Darnold is bigger than Shador's leap. Like Shador is above Deshaun as far as those statistics are concerned, right? Deshaun was much worse in those areas than Shador. So if it's a massive leap for Shador to get to Sam Darnold in those statistical categories, then it is a ginormous leap for Deshaun to get to Sam Darnold from those categories. And much less likely, because at least with Shador, you're betting on the fact that he hasn't had that much NFL experience. It's not like he's been injured a ton. Maybe something clicks. He speeds up his process. He finds better situational awareness. And then boom, you can easily get there. With Deshaun, it's like you got so much he has to overcome to even get to Shador's level that it feels unrealistic. You know what I mean? To say that he's going to reach the level of Sam Darnold, dog. So, yeah, it would be a significantly larger leap than Shador would have to make to get to that place. Jamon says, hey, Q, I agree with what you said. Deshaun won't play this year unless absolutely necessary, multiple injuries. Why do you think Jimmy, AB, and Todd are so open to the media about him possibly being the starter? Is there any truth to what they're saying? They don't want us to panic. I think that's what it is. They want us to feel better about Deshaun so that we're not looking at that situation for what it is, which is a disaster, potentially. You know what I mean? I don't want to guarantee it's a disaster or anything like that, but it could easily be a disaster. And I think they don't want that to be the perception. So they want you to think that Deshaun Watson's like super viable. He might even be back to playing Pro Bowl football so that you don't realize just how bad that room is. Like they're trying to upsell the current quarterback room. One, to probably get leverage in trade talks, right? If people know you're desperate, they're going to raise the prices on you. They're going to price gouge you. That's certainly something that's going to happen. And two, they don't want people internally panicking about the state of this quarterback room. So I think that factors into it as well. I think that's why they're doing this. They don't want us to freak out because they're looking at that quarterback room and not seeing it as a great option, just like us. Yeah, that's my guess, is that they just don't want us to freak out about it. The last question comes from Cleve Ray, says this. Q, if the Browns make it to the wild card this season, do you think Andrew Berry's timeline for this team may adjust, or do you think Andrew Berry will still keep the same mind frame regardless of the season outcome, barring a conference championship or a Super Bowl? So if Andrew gets to the wild card, I think that's part of the timeline, is trying to be competitive for a playoff spot this year. I don't think making the playoffs is necessarily the goal here, but trying to be competitive for a playoff spot is the goal. So I think if they do have that level of success, that is right in what they were hoping for the outcome to be this season. The only way the plan changes, or they have to adjust the change, is if they're much worse than that, right? If they're much better than that, then they were already going to put the foot on the gas in 2027, right? I think that's what they're hoping to do, is get a little bit better and then put the foot on the gas. Think about it like the Browns when they drafted from like 17 to 2020, right? In 17, they were terrible. In 2018, they tried to be competitive and they were almost 500. And then 2019 was the year where, like, you know, they traded for Odell Beckham. They tried to put their foot on the gas. Obviously, that didn't work out. They ended up being worse than they were the year before. But it's like that same kind of three-tier plan where it's like, hey, you take 1 year, you get the draft assets. That's when the Browns had the number 2 overall pick, and this last season as well. And then you spend this year trying to be competitive, trying to just gain some confidence as a team. And then 2027 is when they're going to try to put the foot on the gas. So I think that's the plan currently for them. But let me know what you guys think. Thank you for asking these questions. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.